on socials for extra content. For your eyes only. All links are below.
What makes a work of art disturbing? What is it that all these paintings have in common? Is it the emotions they provoke? Fear, dread, discomfort, and anxiety? Is it the subject matter? Death, decay, isolation, and the slow descent into madness? Is it the uncanny, distorted forms, unnatural proportions, and familiar shapes rendered strange? Is it the symbolism, layers of meaning that connect to universal anxieties? Or is it the aesthetic choices, the use of texture, color, perspective, and visual dissonance? While we can't point to a single reason why we find them so disturbing, we can all agree, upon first viewing, that these artists have successfully been able to capture something that's deeply unsettling to us all. Whether it's the bleak visions of Francisco de Goya, whose black paintings confront violence, despair, and human cruelty, the surreal distortions of Salvador Dali, where reality bends into vivid, dream-like landscapes, the biomechanical nightmares of H.R. Giger, who fuses the human with cold, alien machinery, or the contemporary works of Ken Curry, whose core themes of time, tragedy, and mortality acts as a brutal reminder of the inevitable. Together, these artists represent what's called the dark arts tradition, an approach to painting and sculpture that embraces the macabre, the unsettling, and disturbing. For most of human history, themes like death, madness, deformity, or cruelty were pushed aside, hidden behind allegory, or dismissed as improper. Art was expected to celebrate beauty, grandeur, divinity, and virtue. The dark side of life was always there, but it lived in its shadows. I've always found dark art in general to be fascinating. Some of my favorite artists of all time would be considered to be dark or macabre artists. But I think personally that the darkest art isn't what's made explicitly to be disturbing or visually unsettling, but one that implicitly is so, through an emergent property of the subject, the artist, and the canvas itself. Art that has deeper meaning. Art which is used as a vehicle to explore the unseen. And, in my view, the most powerful form of this is art that turns inward, that explores the depth of the human mind, because in doing so, it explores parts of ourselves we rarely confront. Art shaped by the artist's own reality, whether or not they intended it to be. Their fears, obsessions, and lived experiences bleed into and shape their work, creating some of the most interesting pieces of art ever made. As someone that takes their health seriously, I always find myself stressing out about weird symptoms and health worries, searching online, trying to figure out what it might mean, and finding the right doctor can feel overwhelming. From calling around to figuring out who's available, I usually just push it off until I absolutely have to go. That's why I'm glad this video is sponsored by ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free website and mobile app that lets you easily search and compare high-quality, in-network doctors so you can find the right physician for you. You can read verified reviews from real patients and actually see their appointment times. You can choose who feels right for you, book instantly, and sometimes even get in the same day. So, stop putting off those important check-ins and go to ZocDoc.com/virtualcarbon. Or click the link in the description below. Thank you, ZocDoc, for sponsoring this video. Odilon Redon's noirs were some of the strangest and most unsettling images coming out of 19th century France. At a time when Europe's art scene was dominated by the light-drenched brushstrokes of Impressionism and the polish of Naturalism, Odilon was focused on giving form to his nightmares. In a series he called Les Noirs, or The Blacks, from 1870 to 1890, Redon filled his pages with strange hybrid beings, severed heads floating through empty space, giant staring eyes drifting like balloons, plant-animal chimeras, and strange insects sprouting human faces. Odilon had lifelong health issues and spent much of his childhood in isolation. All of that fed into his sketches. He believed in the superiority of the imagination over observing nature. He described his imagery as coming from dreams, hallucinations, and states of half-consciousness. Many of the strange hybrid beings weren't meant as literal subjects, but as manifestations of his inner visions. His art superseded the surrealism of the 20th century and the psychological horror of the modern era. Odilon's world of darkness, his noirs, can be read as a kind of self-portrait in fragments, manifestations of a personal darkness. Alfred Kubin had a traumatic early life. His mother died of tuberculosis, his father was abusive, and he endured deep loneliness and depression for most of his life. At age 19, he attempted to take his own life at his mother's grave, and suffered a nervous breakdown after a brief military enlistment. Kubin studied briefly in Munich, where he encountered the works of Edvard Munch, James Ensor, and Odilon Redon, artists whose shadowy visions aligned with his own inner world. While his style was clearly inspired by Odilon, Alfred didn't draw his monsters. His work, however, was steeped in symbolism. Kubin filled his scenes with creatures in metamorphosis, serpents with human faces, spectral apes, colossal worms, humanoid forms twisted into impossible shapes, some frozen in moments of transformation between nightmare and waking life. His figures are oppressed, hunted, swallowed, or otherwise dwarfed by hostile environments. The architecture in his work leans towards the surreal and oppressive. Barren plains leading to black voids, crooked houses, and vast chambers. Kubin saw art as a means of confronting the irrational, the repressed thoughts and primal fears that society tries to mask. Peter Birkhäuser already had a successful art career for nearly 20 years when he decided to begin his own artistic journey. On one night, while working late at his studio, a moth landed on the outside of his window. For some reason, this moment captured his attention, and he decided to make a painting out of it, turning the small insect to monstrous proportions. Only later did he understand that the moth was a stand-in for his inner life, drawn to the light but blocked by the glass. The moth was his soul, the glass was the barrier. This one simple painting would cause Peter's life's direction to change completely. Over the next 35 years, he would record over 3,000 dreams and would start painting directly from them. One of the first things he would paint was the world's wound, a face that's been haunting his dreams for 4 years straight by that point. A strange man who's desperately trying to reach him. His face split down the middle. One side is tense and frightened, the other looks controlled and skeptical. The split man embodied the tragic divide within Birkhäuser himself, someone who, through an overdependence on rationality, has stripped away his own sense of spirit and inner purpose. Peter would continue this tradition into his later years, with the goal of mining his own subconscious, translating fragments of dreams, intrusive thoughts, and fleeting visions into something tangible, for the purpose of understanding his own self. The Inward Gaze, 1954 to 1955. Looking inwards isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it stares back at us. In this work, the other inside the mind returns the gaze with a distant alien eye, the personification of Peter's repressed unconscious, joined with mixed symbols of attraction and danger. The Observer, 1966. A strange, almost alien figure watches silently, a constant witness to our lives. It sees us with perfect clarity, beyond self-deception, neither entirely human nor inhuman. It represents a part of the psyche that knows us completely, long before we truly know ourselves. The Woman with the Cup, 1971. Birkhäuser didn't understand his painting at first. A few months later, his wife died, and the image clicked into place. The White Lady is a visitor from the beyond, holding a delicate cup. In folklore, a white lady can signal death. Here, the dark eyes and the offered vessel suggests grief. The cup is both burden and medicine, suffering you don't want, but may need to accept. The Lynx, 1976. His last finished painting shortly before he died at 65. The lynx, an animal known for seeing in the dark, stands for clarity in hard times. Late in life, Birkhäuser felt overwhelmed by the body failing and by energies he couldn't always carry. This final image reads, even in the darkest stretches, there is a steady light to follow. While Peter's work might not seem dark or disturbing at first glance, I personally find it to be some of the most haunting art ever created. These were visions pulled directly from the deepest corners of his mind. Strange images and unsettling premonitions that feel uncanny even now. There's something deeply unnerving about how familiar yet alien they appear, as if they come from a place we've all visited but can't quite remember. Redon's monsters were fragments of his inner life made visible. His noirs show that the uncanny emerges when the artist gives form to what normally stays hidden. Kubin took the same principle further. Redon's visions were fragments, but Kubin built entire oppressive worlds out of them, spaces where the irrational ruled, and every creature, object, and shadow carried symbolic meaning. And Birkhäuser pushed this even deeper, recording his unconscious in real time, treating it like an experiment to map and understand his psyche better. All three of these artists, whether intentionally or not, tapped into a process psychology calls symbol formation. Symbols aren't just decorative elements, they're the mind's way of giving shape to experiences and emotions we can't yet express in plain language. The more personal and unconscious the source, the more the symbol can feel strange, alien, or unsettling even to the person who created it. This is why certain imagery keeps reoccurring in unsettling art. Eyes that watch us, doorways into darkness, fragmented bodies, threatening landscapes. They're not just random inventions, they echo universal psychological motifs. This is why, even in a modern internet age, these same motifs can be seen yet again in unsettling imagery, or in liminal spaces. The same symbols through a new medium. Disturbing art often resonates because it bypasses rational analysis and speaks directly to the unconscious. When we encounter an unfamiliar image, a hybrid creature, a distorted face, an impossible landscape. Our mind searches for meaning in it, often pulling from deep, universal patterns of fear, desire, and transformation. These patterns are sometimes called archetypes and are shared across cultures and time. Doesn't matter how far back in history we go, we can still find these archetypes represented in cultures from all around the world. From antiquity to Bronze and early Iron Age, to the Neolithic, the Mesolithic, the Holocene, and even as early as the Paleolithic. But we cannot talk about dark artists without mentioning my personal favorite, one that I've already mentioned here on the channel before, Zdzisław Beksiński. If there was ever a way to describe Beksiński's art, nightmarish would be doing it a disservice. Beksiński has an almost uncanny ability to bring core concepts of death, decay, and entropy to the visual medium. Worlds and landscapes that I can only describe as manifestations of hell itself. Within every piece is usually one or multiple core elements or subjects which draw our attention, even though most of the time we are unable to truly comprehend or recognize what it is we're even looking at. And while each piece is drastically different from the one before it, there is a continuity here that connects them all. While never outright stated, we can make an assumption here that all his works are interconnected because all his works are depictions of the same place, the same world, a world of Beksiński's nightmares. And as much as I am disturbed by this world, something within me draws me into it. Something makes me want to explore this hellscape. Isolation, anxiety, dread, disconnect, and melancholy are emotions that rule this world. Beksiński never titled any of his works, never explained them, and avoided any and all interpretations of them. He was born in 1929 in Sanok, a small town in southeastern Poland. He was only 10 years old when Nazi Germany invaded in 1939. For the next 5 years, he lived under brutal German occupation. Streets patrolled by soldiers, public executions used as warnings, local Jewish families rounded up and imprisoned, and an atmosphere of constant fear and scarcity. In 1945, as the Eastern Front shifted west, Beksiński saw the war between the retreating Nazi forces and the advancing Red Army. The Carpathian foothills near Sanok became a battleground. Even though he would later claim his art was not meant to be symbolic, those early years left him surrounded by images of destruction, fear, and the inhuman machinery of war. Imagery that clearly echoes in his paintings, as they were traumatic experiences at childhood that would have imprinted on him for life. With this context in mind, his work reads like a response to living with threat and uncertainty in his younger years, a childhood under occupation, and a life of tragedy. Beksiński's wife Zofia died in 1998. A year later, his son Tomasz died by suicide, and in 2005, Beksiński would be murdered in his Warsaw apartment by a teenager he knew after refusing to lend him money, leaving behind a legacy that continues to inspire and unsettle people around the world till this day. Everywhere at the End of Time is a 6-part album series by British musician Leyland Kirby, released under his stage name The Caretaker between 2016 and 2019. The project is an extended exploration of dementia, Alzheimer's disease, and the gradual loss of self through memory degradation. Conceived as a sonic portrayal of dementia, it represents the slow breakdown of memory, identity, and perception over a span of roughly 6.5 hours. Each album is called a stage, with the 6 stages intended to reflect the clinical progression of the disease, from its earliest symptoms to its final terminal phase. The album begins with distant-sounding ballroom music from the 1930s, warm, nostalgic, structured, though already muffled and degraded. With each stage, the distortions deepen, melodies skip and distort, familiar passages loop unnaturally, and moments of clarity are abruptly swallowed by confusing sounds. By the middle stages, the music has become increasingly disjointed, dissolved into echoing voids and abrasive sounds. In the final stages, the music is almost unrecognizable. Any traces of melody are buried under static, low drones, and oppressive silence. The listener is left in a vast, featureless expanse, a soundscape of disorientation, of emptiness, and the erasure of the self. Everywhere at the End of Time has often been called the darkest album ever made, because it so vividly captures the slow, irreversible death of the mind. Which brings us to our final artist. William Utermohlen was an American-born painter who spent most of his career in London. He was known primarily for his figurative and portrait work. In 1995, Utermohlen was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, a turning point that transformed both his life and his art. Rather than stop painting, however, he turned inward, producing a series of self-portraits and experimental works that have since become one of the most documented artistic records of cognitive decline. Early in this period, his portraits still retained recognizable proportions, details, and depth, but over the following years, forms become flatter, features distorted, backgrounds more abstracted, reflecting the erosion of his spatial perception and memory. By the late 1990s, his self-portraits had become hauntingly sparse. The artist, his skills that he honed for so many years, were disintegrating in front of him in real time. Utermohlen painted until 2000, when the disease had advanced to the point that he could no longer work. Whether it's Redon, Kubin, Birkhäuser, Beksiński, The Caretaker, or Utermohlen, they've all proven that art can tap into something universal, showing us that even the darkest visions can help us understand ourselves in the world we live in a deeper way. And I'll leave it at that. I hope you've enjoyed your stay, and I will see you very soon.